You had confidential sources coming out of the woodwork at the last minute. This is going to be an interesting trial.
Oh, very. Well, I'm trying to think what role a confidential source could have in this case. How could one be even tangentially connected to this case? And all I could think is that there is a potential defense line of argument that this house was allegedly somehow connected to drugs or drug dealers, and maybe there's a witness who's going to say that.
Yes, I mean, I think that's an area that they're pursuing. I know the defense has spent a lot of time trying to build up the drug case. What I've also heard, though, in the autopsies, they found no evidence of any drugs in the system of any of the 4 young kids that were killed, that were murdered. But is there a drug angle there? Is one of the surviving people who were in the house, the 2 young women, is she going to be this confidential source? This remains to be seen. The father of Kayla Goncalves has been searching for this confidential source. And at one point, his lawyer, according to what he's told people, received a letter from the FBI telling him not to intervene to look for this confidential source or it could disrupt the case.
But we don't know who it is or what business they're in.
We don't know. Maybe we could just speculate. But, the defense is in the business of raising doubts. I mean, will it be effective?
Well, I think for whatever it's worth, I think the whole line we were discussing about the genetic genealogy, I don't think that will make it in front of a jury. I think that's the kind of thing you make in a written motion to the judge to exclude the DNA as a matter of law from coming in. And I think the judge is going to overrule that. He's going to reject that motion for the reasons Matt Murphy said. And then if they say, well, we want to at least argue it to the jury, I'm not sure it's relevant because they did an actual cheek swab of him. I mean, maybe you could argue it's relevant if you want to show this is a bumbling FBI that has a pattern of crossing lines. I haven't heard anything else that would support that, so I don't think a judge would allow that. But right now, I think it's interesting as a matter of law for a motion, not something you could get in front of a jury.
I mean, at this point, the defense has to use every, I would say, trick that they can, every bit of law that they can. I mean, look at their client's alibi. It's been nearly 2 years, and what they've come up with after they've been pressed numerous times by the court is that he was out at 4 a.m. looking at the stars in a wilderness park where there are no witnesses. It was, below zero that night at the wilderness park, and it was a cloudy sky, but the suspect was out there nevertheless.
Do we know anything? I said before that we think that the knife sheath is the only DNA, but do we know that? I mean, they did a lot of searching of his apartment, of his car, of the bodies.
All that's been released to the public is the knife sheath DNA, the button on the knife sheath, actually. And that is, they've said, compares within reason of doubt to the cheek swab they took after the arrest. The prosecution, if they have their way, won't even mention the DNA that originally got them there, that was taken from the family's home that was tied to the father. They want to keep that out of the case completely, and the defense will be moving heaven and earth to try to bring that in.
Right, just to muck it up a little bit for the jury so it's not so clear cut. Found a knife sheath, the DNA matches this guy right now because we did a cheek swab and it was a perfect match. They'd like to skip whatever happened in the interim.
And the prosecution is smart enough to realize and that the goal of the defense is to try to, as you say it, muck things up. So if they didn't have anything to hide, why wouldn't they just put it into evidence? They said, okay, this is how we got it. This is nothing to be ashamed of, using investigative forensic genealogy to get in there. But they seem to be holding something back, and that's raising more questions and giving the defense something to work with.
And this is now
to the
something
confidential
that's
witnesses,
in which we don't know. But this whole thing that we're discussing about the genetic genealogy took a turn for the better for the defense with this change of venue. How so?
Well, because I think this judge is going to be more sympathetic to the defense. He will demand, I think, to the prosecution. Yes, Hippler. I think he's going to be a bit tougher. It's interesting. On the first day when he convened the court in Boise, the first thing he said was, "I'd like to say I'm happy to be here, but I don't want to begin with a lie." He came right out. That's what he told the courtroom.
I'm sure
and
it's
he's
true.
going to be, yes, he doesn't want to be this. The judge before him, as it seems clear now, couldn't wait to get off the case. As soon as he had the first opportunity to leave the case because of the change of venue, he could have stayed on the case. He was glad to go too. I mean, this is going to be
Judge wanted. I mean, we had Judge. We have Ann Taylor, defense lawyer, and now we have Judge Hippler. Again, it reminds me of my friend. Her last name was Laden. She had a baby boy. She named him Quinn Laden. Just don't. You don't want to come anywhere near it. Stay away. I think maybe change it to Hippner. That's my advice to this judge. Okay, so anyway, so now we're going to go ahead in Boise, supposedly on August 11th, and there just was a motion that, I think it's granted, that Brian Kohberger, in all the pretrial appearances and at the trial, will be allowed to appear in a suit. They're not going to make him wear his prison clothes. And we recently got another look at him because he had to have another mugshot taken. What did the new mugshot show us?
The new mugshot showed us a very stylish, well put together Brian Kohberger, who seems to become almost a new handsome young man in prison. He's
got like new facial hair going.
Yeah, he has a 3-day growth. He's looking good. And you can sort of see his whole demeanor during the different hearings. And there have been so many hearings, and they've all been on Zoom. I haven't been in the courtroom. But he seems to be staring straight ahead all the time. Even when Ann Taylor comes over and puts this maternal arm around his shoulder, he doesn't budge. He seems completely out of it, just staring straight ahead.
It's just like Menendez, really. We've been covering that case too with Leslie Abramson and Eric Menendez. She would do that with the arm around him. Poor Eric, as this poor kid who was abused, trying to telegraph to the jury, this guy deserves your sympathy, not your condemnation. I'm not sure that's going to fly here. He does have a family, though. Have they been participating in any of these hearings? They
have been Zooming into the hearings. They talk with the lawyers in Pennsylvania. Will they come out to the actual trial? I imagine so. I think the families of the victims, 2 of them so far, have gone on the internet to do funding campaigns. The Goncalves family said they needed to raise $50,000 to go to the trial so that all 10 family members could attend. They raised the $50,000 so quickly that now they've raised their demand to $75,000. They'd like people to contribute so they can raise $75,000. They want to be there. They also have been vigorously pushing for the death penalty in this case. That's going to be the next, I think, big debate in this case in these pretrial months, whether or not the death penalty will take place. And the use of the death penalty in Idaho is pretty problematic because of recent events. Last February, Idaho had their first execution was taking place in 9 years. What happened at this execution, they put the guy, his name was Thomas Creech, convicted of murder, into the execution chamber, and they're trying to give him the chemicals that will end his life. For over an hour, they try 8 different veins to get into him, 8 different ways to get the needle into him, and nothing works. And now they had to postpone the execution. I can assure you that the defense will be going through all the details of this botched execution and saying that this is cruel and inhuman punishment, and Idaho just doesn't have the sophistication to make an execution. They just can't do it, and to see if that will affect the judge.
Can't you be executed by firing squad in Idaho?
For this case, last May, they passed a law that went into effect last June that will allow a firing squad. $750,000 was put aside by the state to turn the execution chamber into a place where they could also have a firing squad. That this would be only happen if they couldn't find the chemicals necessary for a chemical execution. Oddly enough, people can get fentanyl on the streets. The state of Idaho has had trouble at times getting the correct chemicals for an execution.
Wow.
The $750,000 that's been put aside to make this a room suitable for a firing squad has never been used. They have not done any sort of renovations at the state penitentiary to this date.
It just occurred to me something, Howard. Is there any chance the confidential informant is his criminology professor who was so respected back in Pennsylvania?
Dr. Ramsin?
Yeah.
She's an interesting woman. I mean, she writes brilliantly, perceptively about serial killers. She's a forensic psychologist. She teaches at DeSalle University. That was, he was her star student. She is in communication with the family. I know that. I've been told that by people who know. She got in the early days, right after his arrest. She contacted the family. She said, "Is there any way I can help?" And they were so glad to have someone who wanted to be supportive. She said, according to what I've heard, "I don't know if he's innocent or guilty, but if I can help you, guide you through this complicated process, I'd be glad to." And she has conveyed through the family information to him. I've been told that. Could she be the confidential witness? That would be really interesting. I think, I think at this point she's probably working on her own book.
Yeah, well, I just feel like it's probably not her. But the reason I thought of it is, of course, she has access to a bunch of people getting advanced degrees and degrees in criminology. And as we've seen, this isn't the first time this has happened. There can be a fine line between criminologist and criminal. And it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility to think maybe someone like the feds or law enforcement would go to somebody like that pre-Brian Kohberger and say, let us know if anybody comes across your radar who you've got concerns about. And it could just be something where now they're protecting her. This is total speculation by me. It's probably more than likely the other angle. For those of us holding our breath for the past several months as we came up to this election, we can finally exhale. Work can at last be done on the major issues this country's facing, one of the most significant being our national debt. The fact is, we're broke, and that debt is a house of cards for our nation that cannot be quickly dismantled. So the strategy remains the same. You might want to diversify your savings. This is why I want to tell you about Birch Gold. So many things are out of our control, out of our president's control. So it can be important to have a safe haven for your savings. Birch Gold Group can help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. And the best news is it does not cost you 1 cent out of pocket. Text MK to 989898 to get your free info kit. Plus, right now, you will receive a free 1-ounce silver eagle coin for every $5,000 purchased. Protect your savings with Birch Gold. Text MK to 989898 and claim your eligibility for free silver today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.